The brains of the 5 Zorgons splattered over the walls of the once sterile hallway, as Captain John Adams's plasma repeater reduced their insectoid skulls to smouldering gore. Adams stormed forward, armored boots stomping on twitching alien limbs, while stepping over the charred remains of their still smoking headless bodies. He didn't have time to waste. This was their chance to seize a Zorgon ship and finally take the fight to the enemy. For decades, the Zorgons had been the terror of human-controlled space, never making their motives clear as they raided colonies, abducted innocent civilians, and struck EDF vessels with hit-and-run attacks before slinking back to their hives. Despite their best efforts and sacrifices, the EDF had never landed a decisive blow. Always on guard, always under siege, humanity was being bled dry. Now at the edge of human territory aboard the EDF Indomitable, Adams and his squad had ambushed a lone Zorgon corvette. In minutes, his troops would finish sweeping the enemy ship. If they could commandeer it and escape, it would give humanity a way to finally track the alien menace back to their lairs and end their reign of terror. This was the closest they had ever been. Failure was unacceptable. If the Zorgons escaped, the abductions and attacks would continue until humanity was decimated or enslaved. This was their one shot. Adams gripped his rifle tight and continued down the gore-slicked hallway. At the end lay the bridge, where they could turn this alien killing machine against its creators. They had to seize this ship intact, or humanity would never recover. Adams kicked aside a still-twitching Zorgon corpse as he reached the bridge of the alien vessel. His heart pounded in his ears, nearly drowning out the whine of the plasma repeater, cooling down from the slaughter he had just unleashed. This was it. Seizing this Zorgon ship was humanity's best shot at finally gaining the upper hand. He slammed his fist on the door control panel, and the sleek metal doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Adams burst onto the bridge, rifle at the ready, expecting heavy resistance. But the large chamber was empty, save for the eerie glow of holographic displays. "Bridge is clear," Adams reported over the comms. "Sweep the rest of the ship and prepare to—" An urgent message cut him off, blaring over the ship's speakers. "This is New Hope Colony. We are under attack by a massive Zorgon fleet. They've broken through our orbital defenses. Ground forces are being overwhelmed. They're killing everyone. We need immediate assistance. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us." The transmission dissolved into static, and the sound of distant plasma fire before cutting out. Adam's blood ran cold. The Zorgons had never launched an assault of this scale before. They were making a play to establish a foothold right in human territory. And New Hope Colony was just the beginning. He opened a channel back to the Indomitable. "Captain Adams to Indomitable. We've secured the Zorgon vessel, but just intercepted a distress call from New Hope. The colony is under heavy assault by a Zorgon fleet. They're already on the ground and slaughtering civilians." There was a pause before the reply came. "Understood, Captain. We'll recall the boarding parties and set a course for New Hope immediately. We'll hit them with everything we've got." "Negative, Indomitable," Adams countered. "We can't let this ship slip away. It's our only chance to track them back to their hives. You proceed to New Hope at best speed. We'll follow in this corvette once we get it underway." "But, sir, you'll be outnumbered and outgunned if you go in alone. Let us—" "That's an order, Lieutenant," Adams barked. "Get to New Hope and save as many colonists as you can. Make those bugs pay for every inch of ground. We'll be right behind you. Give 'em hell. Adams out." He switched off the comms and turned to his squad, who were filing onto the bridge. "You heard the distress call. The Zorgons are hitting New Hope with everything they've got, trying to get a foothold to strike deeper into our territory. Well, we're not going to let that happen." Adams gestured to the alien controls. "Jax, Kimura, get this bird in the air. The Indomitable will head to New Hope and do what they can, but they'll be outnumbered and facing heavy ground forces." He slammed a fresh power cell into his plasma repeater. "So we're going to commandeer this flying roach motel, and then we're going to ride it straight into the heart of that Zorgon fleet. Hit 'em from behind while they're busy buzzing New Hope." Grim determination spread across the faces of his squad. They knew this was a desperate play, but what choice did they have? If the Zorgons gained even a single foothold, more systems would fall, more innocent blood would be shed. They had to act. As the alien ship hummed to life around them, Adams stared out the view screen at the stars streaking by. He thought of the colonists on New Hope, facing down plasma fire and chittering hordes of insectoid nightmares. Help was coming. They just had to hold out a little longer. Then the comms crackled again. It was the Indomitable. "Captain, we've lost contact with New Hope's ground teams. Last transmissions indicate the Zorgons have overrun their defenses and are sweeping the colony." There was a heavy pause. "They're wiping out everyone they find. No prisoners, no mercy." Adams' grip tightened on his rifle until his knuckles whitened. Jax looked up from the navigational controls, his face a mix of horror and hatred. "No mercy," Adams growled. "Well, that's just fine, because we're all out of mercy too. It's time someone gave the Zorgons a taste of human vengeance." The stars outside the view screen blurred into streaks of light as the captured Zorgon ship leapt into FTL, racing towards the besieged colony and the waiting enemy fleet. There would be no mercy. Not anymore. The Zorgons had sown the wind. Now they would reap the whirlwind. The captured Zorgon ship dropped out of FTL at the edge of the New Hope system. Adams stared out the view screen in horror at the scene before him. The once thriving colony was now a smouldering ruin, its atmosphere choked with acrid smoke and debris. The twisted wreckage of EDF defense platforms and ships littered the void, still glowing from the heat of their destruction. And swarming over it all like locusts were the Zorgon ships, dozens of them, their chitinous hulls gleaming in the light of the system's sun. They buzzed around the ravaged colony, disgorging more troops and bombing any pockets of resistance into oblivion. Adams' hands clenched into fists, his whole body shaking with barely contained rage. They were too late. The colony was already lost, but there were still Zorgons left to kill. He turned to his crew, his eyes hard as steel. "Jax, bring weapons online. Kimura, get me a target lock on the nearest bug. It's time we showed these bastards what happens when you piss off the human race." The crew leapt to their stations, their faces grim but determined. They had all lost friends and loved ones to the Zorgons. Now it was time for payback. Adams strode to the command chair and sat down, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. The Zorgon language was like nothing he had ever seen, but the stolen translation matrix was already working, the alien glyphs morphing into readable text. "Weapons hot," Jax reported, his voice tight with anticipation. "Main cannon locked and loaded." "Good," Adams growled. "Fire when ready." The Zorgon ship shuddered as its main gun unleashed a searing beam of plasma, the shot lancing out across the void and spearing a Zorgon frigate amidships. The enemy vessel crumpled like a tin can, its hull peeling open and spilling burnt corpses into space. The Zorgon fleet reacted instantly, a dozen ships peeling off to face this new threat. Adams grinned wolfishly as plasma fire began to slam into their shields. The hijacked ship rocked and shuddered, but held firm. "Evasive maneuvers," he barked. "Keep our guns on target." Jax and Kimura worked furiously, their hands flying over the controls as they wove the ship through the enemy fire, all while keeping their own weapons trained on the Zorgon fleet. The main cannon fired again and again, each shot claiming another enemy ship. But for every ship they destroyed, two more took its place. The Zorgons were swarming like angry hornets, their plasma fire growing more intense by the second. An explosion rocked the ship, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. "Shields at 50%!" Kimura shouted over the din of battle. "We can't take much more of this." Adams gritted his teeth. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but he refused to give up. Not while there was still a chance they could hurt the enemy. Suddenly the comms crackled to life. It was a transmission from the Indomitable. "Captain Adams, this is the Indomitable. We're inbound to your position with a full EDF battle group. ETA 15 minutes. Just hold on a little longer." Relief flooded through Adams. Reinforcements were coming, they just had to survive until then. He turned to his crew, a fierce grin on his face. "You hear that? The cavalry's on its way. We just need to keep these bugs busy for a little while longer." Jax and Kimura nodded, their faces set with determination. They redoubled their efforts, the ship weaving and dodging like a prizefighter as they traded blows with the Zorgon fleet. But even as they fought, Adams knew they were running out of time. The colony below was still under assault, the Zorgons methodically exterminating any survivors. If the reinforcements didn't arrive soon, there would be no one left to save. The ship rocked again, warnings blaring from every console. "Shields are failing," Kimura cried. "One more hit and we're done for." Adams stared out at the seething mass of Zorgon ships, his jaw set with grim determination. They had come this far. They couldn't fail now, not when they were so close. He opened a channel to the Indomitable. "Hurry," was all he said. Then he cut the transmission and turned back to the battle raging outside. The Zorgons were closing in, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. Adams took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the trigger for the main cannon. One last shot, one last chance to make the bugs pay. He exhaled and pulled the trigger, a prayer on his lips. The cannon roared, the shot blazing out into the heart of the Zorgon fleet. For a moment, there was silence. Then the enemy ships began to explode, one after another, like a string of firecrackers. Adams let out a whoop of triumph. They had done it. They had bought the time they needed. But even as he celebrated, he knew the battle was far from over. The Zorgons were still out there, still a threat to every human in the galaxy. And as long as they existed, Captain John Adams would be there to fight them. He settled back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the view screen and the distant flashes of the approaching EDF fleet. The reinforcements would be here soon, and when they arrived, the real fight would begin. The fight to take back the colonies, the fight to end the Zorgon threat once and for all. The fight for humanity's very survival. Adams' jaw clenched as he surveyed the ravaged colony below. The smouldering ruins a testament to the Zorgon's brutality. He turned to his crew, his eyes blazing with determination. "We're going down there," he declared. "We're going to rescue as many survivors as we can, and we're going to hit those bugs where it hurts." The crew exchanged glances, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that every second they delayed, more innocent lives were lost. "Jax, Kimura, you're with me," Adams barked. "We'll take a strike team and fight our way to the Zorgon command center. That's where they'll be keeping any prisoners. It's also where we'll plant this." He held up a small, innocuous-looking device. "An EMP, powerful enough to fry every Zorgon ship and defense in the area. We set this off, and we give the colonists a fighting chance." Jax and Kimura nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They knew this was a one-way trip, but they were ready to lay down their lives for humanity. Minutes later, Adams and his strike team were on the ground, their boots crunching on the rubble-strewn streets of the colony. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of death, the silence broken only by the distant chittering of Zorgon warriors. They moved quickly and quietly, their weapons at the ready. Every shadow was a potential threat, every corner a possible ambush. But Adams led them forward, his eyes constantly scanning for any sign of survivors. Suddenly a plasma bolt sizzed past his head, scorching the wall behind him. Zorgons, a whole pack of them, skittering out from the ruins like cockroaches. "Contact!" Adams roared, his rifle already spitting plasma. His team opened fire, the air thick with the sizzle of energy weapons and the shrieks of dying Zorgons. They fought their way forward, inch by bloody inch, leaving a trail of smoldering insectoid corpses in their wake. But for every Zorgon they killed, 2 more seemed to take its place, an endless tide of chitinous bodies and slashing claws. By the time they reached the command center, they were battered and bloodied, their armor scorched and their numbers dwindled. But still they pressed on, driven by a righteous fury that burned hotter than any plasma. They blasted their way inside, Adams in the lead, his rifle blazing. And then they saw it, a sight that stopped them dead in their tracks. Humans, colonists, strapped to grotesque machines, their bodies punctured by tubes and wires. Some were already dead, their lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling. Others twitched and moaned, their minds and bodies broken by whatever horrific experiments the Zorgons had subjected them to. "Dear God," Kimura whispered, her face pale. "What have they done?" Adam's grip tightened on his rifle, his knuckles white. "They're harvesting them, using them for spare parts." Rage, white-hot and all-consuming, surged through him. He wanted to burn this whole place to the ground, to make the Zorgons pay for every atrocity they had committed. But first they had to get the survivors out. "Jack, set the EMP," he ordered, his voice tight with barely contained fury. "Kimura, help me get these people out of here." They worked frantically, disabling the machines and freeing the colonists, those that were still alive. Many were too far gone, their bodies ravaged beyond repair. For them, the only mercy was a quick death. Adams carried a young woman in his arms, her body light and frail. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with pain and fear. Are you here to save us?" she whispered. "So yes," Adams said softly. "You're safe now. We're getting you out of here." Tears streamed down her face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Thank you." Jax's voice crackled over the comm. "EMP set. We've got 5 minutes before it blows." "Copy that," Adams replied. "Everyone move out, double time." They raced back through the corridors, their path now clogged with the bodies of the Zorgons they had slain on their way in. Adams led the way, the young woman still cradled in his arms. They burst out into the open just as the EMP detonated, a pulse of blue energy washing over the colony. Zorgon ships dropped from the sky like stones, their systems fried. Defensive turrets sparked and went still, their deadly hum silenced. For a moment there was silence. Then a ragged cheer went up from the survivors, their faces streaked with tears and dirt. Adams set the young woman down gently, his own eyes wet with unshed tears. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Zorgons, had saved lives. But as he looked out over the ruined colony, he knew this was only the beginning. The Zorgons would be back and in greater numbers. This was just one battle in a war that would decide the fate of humanity. He turned to his team, his expression hard. "Let's get these people to the Indomitable, and then—" He looked up at the sky where the Zorgon ships still burned. "Then we take the fight to them." As the EMP's blue pulse faded, the Zorgon ships that had been swarming over New Hope like locusts began to drop from the sky. Their chitinous hulls, once gleaming and impenetrable, crackled with energy discharges as their systems failed, one by one. The insectoid vessels slammed into the ground, kicking up plumes of dirt and debris, their structures shattering on impact. On the ground, the Zorgon warriors who had been methodically exterminating the colonists suddenly found themselves cut off from their hive mind. They skittered about in disarray, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. Some fired their plasma rifles wildly, the shots going wide and striking their own kind. Others simply collapsed, their limbs twitching as their neural implants overloaded. It was into this chaos that the EDF reinforcements arrived, a phalanx of sleek human ships descending from orbit. Their hulls shone with a silver sheen, the emblem of the Earth Defense Force proudly emblazoned on their sides. From their bellies, dropships emerged, disgorging squads of heavily armed soldiers onto the battle-scarred surface of New Hope. Leading the charge was Captain John Adams, his armor still scorched and dented from his daring raid on the Zorgon command center. His eyes blazed with a fierce determination as he rallied his troops, his voice booming over the comm channels. "Forward, let's show these bugs what happens when they mess with humanity." The EDF soldiers surged forward, their boots pounding on the rubble-strewn ground. They met the disoriented Zorgon forces head-on, plasma rifles barking and grenades detonating in blinding flashes. The air was filled with the stench of ozone and burning chitin as the two sides clashed. But this time the outcome was never in doubt. With their ships destroyed and their hive mind disrupted, The Zorgons stood no chance against the disciplined and vengeful human forces. They fell by the dozens, their bullet-ridden bodies littering the ground. As the last Zorgon warrior fell, a cheer went up from the EDF soldiers. They had done it. New Hope was saved. In the aftermath of the battle, as medics tended to the wounded and engineers began the long process of rebuilding, Captain Adams stood amidst the ruins, his helmet cradled under one arm. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but his eyes shone with a fierce pride. A figure approached him, picking their way through the debris. It was Admiral Hackett, the commander of the EDF fleet. The older man's face was lined and weathered, but he smiled as he extended a hand to Adams. "Captain, that was some damn fine work," Hackett said, his voice gruff but warm. "You saved a lot of lives today." Adams took the offered hand, shaking it firmly. "Just doing my job, sir, but we can't stop here. The Zorgons will be back." Hackett nodded, his expression turning serious. "You're right. Which is why I'm promoting you to the rank of Commodore, effective immediately, and I'm giving you command of a special task force with one mission: hunt down every last Zorgon stronghold and burn them to the ground." Adams felt a swell of emotion in his chest. It was a daunting task, but one he was more than ready to accept. "I won't let you down, Admiral." "I know you won't, son," Hackett said, clapping him on the shoulder. As the Admiral walked away, already barking orders into his comm, Adams looked out over the ruins of New Hope. The colony would rebuild, he knew. Humanity would rebuild. And the Zorgons? They would learn to fear the sight of human ships on the horizon. In the weeks and months that followed, Adams and his task force became the stuff of legend. They struck at Zorgon outposts and hive worlds with a fury that seemed unquenchable, their ships always seeming to be one step ahead of the enemy. The Zorgons, so used to being the predators, now found themselves the prey. They retreated to their core worlds, fortifying their borders and licking their wounds. But there would be no respite, no quarter given. For every human life the Zorgons had taken, Adams and his warriors exacted a toll in blood. And back on Earth, in the halls of power, a new resolve took hold. No longer would humanity cower in fear of the alien menace. No longer would they be content to simply defend and react. It was time for humanity to take the offensive, to secure its place among the stars. For the EDF, for the fallen of New Hope, for the future of all mankind, the fight would carry on, and leading the charge, his eyes always fixed on the horizon, would be Commodore John Adams. The hero of New Hope, the bane of the Zorgons, the man who taught humanity to fight back. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.